la resaca.
Electricity, ladies and gentlemen. A mysterious force that can unravel the confusing mixture of intermingled substances that surround us and produce pure elements.
Davy was an absolutely first-rate scientist. However, many will come to say that his greatest discovery is Michael Faraday.
Metals unknown, that is, until I isolated potassium from molten potash and sodium, as I showed you last time, from common salt. That same magical...
Quizá Faraday no había nacido caballero, pero no iba a permitir que las barreras sociales le impidieran seguir una carrera en las ciencias. Trabajaba sin descanso por las noches para unir sus notas de las conferencias en un libro para su nuevo héroe.
Lord, help me to think only of others, to be of use to mankind. Help me be part of the great circle that is your work and love. Lord, I am your servant.
Well, this is excellent work, Faraday. So what is it you aim to do with your life?
My desire, sir, is to escape from trade, which I find vicious and selfish, and to become a servant of science, which I imagine makes its pursuers amiable and liberal.
Really? Well, I shall leave it to the experience of a few years to set you right on that score. Look, I haven't anything at the moment. I'll send a note if anything comes up.
Pese a este humillante revés, Faraday estaba decidido a liberarse de sus faenas diarias. Su paciencia se vio recompensada.
Newman, meet Mr. Michael Faraday. He's going to be my helper while I recover. He assures me he is a Christian fellow. Perhaps with God and Faraday in charge of the chemicals, you and I will be safe in our place of work.
Thank you, Professor Davy. Welcome, Faraday.
Oh, no, thank you, and thank you, Sir Humphrey.
Just stick to your job and do as you're told, and you'll be fine, Faraday.
Faraday se convirtió en asistente de laboratorio y absorbía con avidez cualquier migaja de conocimiento que Davy se dignara a impartir. Pero con el tiempo el alumno superaría al maestro. La sensación de la época era la electricidad.
Another charge, Newman.
Acababan de inventar la batería y se realizaban todo tipo de experimentos. Pero nadie entendía realmente qué era esta extraña fuerza de la electricidad.
The academic establishment at the time thought that electricity was, like a fluid flowing through a pipe, pushing its way along. But in 1821, a Danish researcher showed that when you pass an electrical current through a wire and place a compass near it, it deflected the needle at right angles.
Esta era la primera vez que los investigadores veían que la electricidad afectaba a un imán. Fue el primer atisbo de dos fuerzas que se habían considerado totalmente separadas. Ahora se unificaban de forma inexplicable.
Faraday, come look at this. Another bright spark around here. Perhaps you can work it out. Ersted's reported an amazing finding. We're just replicating it here.
Let's try the compass on the other side.
Now that is remarkable.
But if the electrical force is flowing through the wire, why does the needle not move in the same direction, parallel to the wire?
Quite.
Let's try turning the whole apparatus round.
Again, Newman.
So, the electrical force goes this way, The compass points that way. How can one affect the other?
Perhaps the electricity is throwing out some invisible force as it moves along.
What?
Perhaps some sort of electrical force is emanating outwards from the wire.
Oh, my dear boy, let me tell you that at the University of Cambridge, electricity flows through a wire, not sideways to it.
Well, that may be what they teach at Cambridge, but it doesn't explain what's happening before our eyes.
No, let's just get on. Let's swap the compass to below the wire.
El por qué la brújula se desviaba en ángulos rectos y por qué la electricidad afectaba la brújula tenía pasmados a Davy y a muchos otros.
As we celebrate the marriage of Michael and Sarah.
Para Faraday, sin embargo, el problema se convirtió en una obsesión. Era una fascinación inspirada por su religión. Para él, el problema era una forma de entender los misterios del Señor.
There was a small, almost persecuted group in London called the Sandemanians. They were religious, not really a sect. They were just a small subset, sort of like Quakers. Faraday was a member of that group. It was a very gentle, decent group. They believed that underneath the whole surface of reality, everything was created by God in a unified way, that if you opened up one little part of it, you could see how everything was connected.
Michael Faraday was someone who, like Einstein, thought in terms of pictures.
Faraday was different from anybody else. He had a flair for understanding his experiments, for understanding what was really going on inside them.
Al colocar metódicamente una brújula por todo el derredor de un alambre electrificado, Faraday comenzó a notar una pauta.
What everyone else at the time had been taught was that forces travel in straight lines. Faraday was different. Faraday imagined that invisible lines of force flowed around an electric wire. And then he imagined that a magnet had similar lines emerging from it, and that those lines would get caught up in this flow. It was a bit like a flag in the wind.
Pero el gran salto imaginativo de Faraday fue cambiar este experimento en su cabeza. En vez de que un cable eléctrico moviera la aguja de una brújula, se preguntó si lograría que un imán permanente moviera un cable.
I've never seen you like this, Faraday. You look like a happy child.
I'm shaking, Newman. Underneath, I'm shaking. You see, John? You see?
Yes.
This is the experiment of the century. It's the invention of the electric motor. Scale up the magnets and the wires, make them really big. Attach heavy weights to them, and they'll be dragged along. But almost more importantly, he's inventing a new kind of physics here.
Aunque no se dio cuenta en su momento, Faraday acababa de demostrar un principio fundamental. Los químicos de la batería se habían transformado en electricidad en el cable, que se había combinado con el imán para producir movimiento. Detrás de todas estas fuerzas distintas había algo en común: energía.
A couple of months earlier, Davy had been elected president of the Royal Society, which was the elite body of English science. But then he saw this great discovery published in the Quarterly Journal of Science. I don't know if he was envious, but he certainly saw that this young man who had been his assistant, this mere blacksmith's son, had come up with one of the greatest discoveries of the Victorian era.
Davy accuses Faraday of plagiarizing similar work from another eminent British scientist, William Wollaston.
So, Faraday, what does Wollaston make of all this?
He's written to me and assures me that he's taken no offense. And he acknowledges that what I published was entirely my own work.
Right. Davy is just being an ass.
But will Davy now retract his allegation?
Sadly, no. In fact, he's still vehemently opposed to you being elected a member of the Society.
Really? And what do you think?
Faraday, my dear boy, you have my vote.
And mine. And I believe you even have Wollaston's.
Oh, what a mess.
Well, no matter. It's the science that counts. So tell me, how does this wire of yours spin round its magnet? What mysterious forces are at play?
There seems to be an electromagnetic interaction. In my mind, I see a swirling array of lines of force spinning out of the electrified wire, like a spiraling web.
But invisible lines of force, it's all a bit vague, isn't it?
Faraday, might I have a word in private?
Certainly.
Listen, Faraday, let's stop this nonsense. I want you to take down your ballot paper from the notice board.
Sir Humphrey, I see no reason to take it down. My friends have proposed me. It is they who put the paper up. I will not take it down. Good day.
Faraday fue elegido miembro de la Real Sociedad. Davy murió 5 años después, víctima de sus muchas inhalaciones gaseosas. Con el tiempo, el mundo de fuerzas invisibles de Faraday traería toda una nueva forma de entender la energía. Había comenzado lo que Einstein llamó la Gran Revolución. En el corazón mismo de este nuevo y excitante mundo de energía, creció Einstein.
My father and uncle wanted to make their fortune by bringing electric light to the streets of Germany. From an early age, I loved to look at machines, understand how things work.
He's going to kill himself. Albert, stay there.
I experienced a miracle when my father showed me a compass. I trembled and grew cold. There had to be something behind objects that lay deeply hidden. At high school, they had their ideas about what I should learn. I had my own. I was merely interested in physics, maths, philosophy, and playing the violin. Everything else was a bore.
Einstein! On your feet! As you obviously know everything about geology, tell me, how do the rocks start on here?
It's pretty much the same to me whichever way they run, Herr Professor.
Los maestros de Einstein trataban de hacerlo entrar en razón mientras Faraday demostraba que la energía podía convertirse de una forma a otra. También se creía que ya se habían descubierto todas las formas de energía. Einstein iba a demostrar que se equivocaban, pues descubriría una nueva y vasta reserva de energía oculta donde a ningún otro científico se le había ocurrido buscar, en lo profundo del corazón de la materia.
¿Cuántos años tenía Einstein cuando publicó sus artículos en la revista Annalen der Physik? 15, 26, 34. Continuamos. En Annalen der Physik, la primera revista alemana de física. Regresamos.
100 años antes del nacimiento de Einstein, el rey Luis XV ocupaba el trono de Francia. Pero el antiguo poder absoluto de la monarquía sobre el pueblo comenzaría a desafiarse.
Jacques, leave the windows. Forget the rain. We need air.
La Revolución Francesa estaba a la vuelta de la esquina.
This was the era of enlightenment, when intellectuals believed very firmly that the way forward lay in science. And they felt that one of the first tasks that lay ahead of them was to rationalize and to classify every single kind of matter so they could see how it all interacted together.
Antoine Lavoisier, un joven aristócrata rico, decidió asumir esta tarea para ver si había alguna conexión básica entre todas las cosas de la vida diaria, todas las sustancias distintas en el mundo. Pero lo que como científico funcionaba para Lavoisier, su meticulosa y casi obsesiva atención al detalle, habría también de ser su perdición.
Monsieur Lavoisier, you are, if my eyes do not deceive me, consuming only milk this evening. First you had a glass of milk, now you are eating a bowl of milk. Will you next move on to a plate of milk?
Your precise observations commend you as a lady of scientific curiosity, mademoiselle. Most unusual. As you seek knowledge, so I shall dispense it. For the last 5 weeks, I have taken nothing but milk.
Good God, man. I would rather die than fast on milk for 5 weeks. Are you in the grip of some horrendous ailment?
On the contrary, I am investigating the effects of diet on health.
Monsieur, with the greatest of respect to a member of the Royal Academy of Sciences, your gut must think your throat has been slit.
Whereas your gut count is no doubt petitioning the Academy for a widening of your throat.
Marianne, how dare you insult the Count? Don't forget what the Count offers. Not just marriage, but think of how you will be introduced to all the salon. You will be the toast of Paris.
Would it not be a shame, madame, to burden you with the duties of matrimony before you have had a chance to experience your curiosity for nature?
Shall we all go through? It's getting rather hot in here.
Do you really plan to marry the Amaval?
There is a plan, but it is not mine.
Then I must contrive to save you.
Lavoisier no era científico de profesión, era el jefe de recaudación de impuestos en París. Su gran idea fue construir un enorme muro alrededor de la ciudad y cobrar un impuesto por todo lo que entraba y salía. Pero sus impuestos sobre las cosas sencillas de la vida, pan, vino, queso, no lo hicieron muy popular entre la gente común. El joven escrupuloso y maniático, sin embargo, se permitía algún acto de pasión ocasional. En 1771, Lavoisier se casó con Marianne Pauls, la hija de su colega en la oficina de impuestos, salvándola así, como lo había prometido, de un matrimonio arreglado con un conde 40 años mayor que ella.
Allow me to show you something.
Lavoisier, I think, found his job as a tax collector really rather tedious, and the times he looked forward to were the evenings and the weekends when he could indulge his passion for chemical experimentation. And he called those times his jours de bonheur, his days of happiness.
Madame. What will happen if I take a bar of copper or iron and leave it outside in the rain for months on end. Madame Lavoisier.
Monsieur Lavoisier.
The metals. What will become of them?
Is this a verbal examination? Prior to an examination proper, sir?
I merely seek the truth.
Then you join with me, monsieur, for you know the truth. The copper will become covered in a green verdigris, and the iron will rust. I believe the term is, calcined.
Most impressive, my charming wife. But let me press you further. When the metal rusts, does it get heavier or lighter?
Why, sir, I think you mean to trap me.
Oh. And perhaps this little butterfly should land and allow me to take a closer look.
Every last citizen in France of sensible age knows that when a metal rusts, it wakes away. It gets lighter and eventually disappears. Stop. I have not finished. Contain yourself, sir. There is more. In a recently published pamphlet by a brilliant young chemist, Antoine Lavoisier demonstrates that the iron combines with the air. It, in fact, becomes heavier.
Most impressive. I intend...
Now, whatever you intend, monsieur, I intend to be by your side. I will learn all I can about your science and become your worthy colleague.
Then let me show you how the iron combines with the air to form such a delicate union.
Tomorrow, monsieur. Tomorrow.
Marianne aprendió química junto a su esposo, pero muy pronto buscó otras formas de contribuir a su trabajo. Aprendió inglés para traducir obras científicas contemporáneas. Tomó clases de dibujo para poder registrar con detalle forense las minucias de su trabajo juntos. Dirigía el laboratorio y era la cara pública de Lavoisier, sociedad anónima. Era capital en todo este esfuerzo de investigación.
That is a terrible thing to say. You are a cheeky man.
This way, please, gentlemen. Monsieur, it is my great ambition to demonstrate that nature is a closed system. That in any transformation, no amount of matter, no mass, is ever lost, and none is gained. Over here, please. This precise amount of water is heated to steam. This steam is brought into contact with a red-hot iron barrel embedded in the coals. From this end, we cool the steam. But interestingly, we collect less water than we started with. So clearly, we lose a certain amount of water. However, we also collect a gas. And the weight of the iron barrel increases. Now, when we combine these two increases, the new weight of the iron barrel and the gas we have collected, they are exactly equal to the weight of the lost water.
But is it atmospheric air, Monsieur Lavoisier?
No. No, because I am measuring it to the very last grain. I can see that it is lighter than the air around us, and moreover, it is flammable. Voila.
Water is made out of hydrogen and oxygen. So what he had done is get the oxygen to stick to the inside of a red-hot iron rifle barrel. He was basically just making rust, which is oxygen and iron, but he was making the rust really quickly. Now that left the hydrogen, what he called combustible air, and that was just floating around as a gas. No mass had been lost, it had merely been transformed. And now he wanted to transform it all back into water.
This is only the beginning. In the next few months, I hope to demonstrate that I can recombine this combustible air with vital air and transform them both back into water. I will recreate exactly the same amount of water that was lost here in this process. It is my hope to complete the cycle, water into gas, into water, and not a drop lost.
For a long time, Lavoisier had suspected that the exact amount of matter, the mass, involved in any transformation was always conserved. But to prove this, he had to perform thousands of experiments, and he had to do the measurements with incredible accuracy. That's where his great wealth from being a tax collector came in. He could afford to commission the most sensitive instruments ever built. He became obsessed with accuracy.
Pero los métodos exactos de Lavoisier comenzaban a enfurecer a una creciente muchedumbre de parisinos hambrientos y decepcionados.
Antoine? Antoine? Oh, wake up, Antoine!
I'm sorry. What time is it?
It is almost time to receive Monsieur Marat. The Academy asks you to assess his designs. He claims to have made a great discovery. Oh, Antoine, have you forgotten?
There's another charlatan with an idea to peddle. God give me patience. Monsieur Marat.
Monsieur, I have invented a device which projects an image of the substance of fire onto a screen. You see? When a lantern is shone through a flame, we see a shimmering pattern above the flame. My device renders the substance of fire visible.
Have you collected it, this substance of fire? Have you trapped it and measured it?
Well, no, but one can see it.
I'm sorry, in the absence of exact measurements, of precise observations, without rigorous reasoning, one can only be engaging in conjecture, so this is not science.
I am not given to conjecture, monsieur.
Really, no. If you will excuse me, I am extremely busy today, but thank you. Thank you.
So that is all? Then good day, monsieur!
Well, let me guess, Marat. The King's scientific despot has decreed that your invention does not conform to the version of the truth as laid down by the Academy.
Lavoisier. He talks about facts. He worships the truth.
Listen to me, my friend. They are all the same, the Royal Academies. They insult the liberty of the mind.
They think they are the sole arbiters of genius. They are rotten to the core, just like every other tentacle of the king. The people. It is they who will determine right and wrong.
Don't worry. In my next pamphlet, I will expose this persecutor of yours.
Durante años, los Lavoisier quemaron, cortaron, fundieron e hirvieron cualquier sustancia concebible. Habían demostrado que mientras se fuera escrupuloso al recolectar los vapores, líquidos y polvos creados en una transformación, la masa no mermaba. Los líquidos podían convertirse en gases, los metales podían oxidarse, la madera terminar como humo y cenizas, pero de la materia, los diminutos átomos que conforman todas las sustancias, no se perdía nada. La gloria máxima de esta obra fue su notable uso de la electricidad estática para hacer que el oxígeno y el hidrógeno volvieran a combinarse en agua. Cuando estalló la Revolución Francesa, la familia real y un gran número de aristócratas perdieron la cabeza en la guillotina.
To the French revolutionaries of 1790, Lavoisier meant one thing and one thing only. He was the despised tax collector who built that wall around Paris.
El trabajo de Lavoisier como recaudador de impuestos lo puso bajo sospecha. Lo denunció un fallido científico convertido en periodista radical, Jean-Paul Marat.
Où est Lavoisier?
Je sais pas.
Lavoisier! Lavoisier! Lavoisier!
What Lavoisier did is absolutely central to science and especially T equals MC squared. Because what he said is if you take a bunch of matter, you can break it apart, you can recombine it, you can do anything to it, and the stuff of the matter won't go away. If the mob burned Paris to the ground, utterly razed it, shattered the bricks into rubble and dust, and burned the buildings into ashes and smoke, turns out if you put a huge dome over Paris and weighed all the smoke and all the ashes and all the rubble, it would add up to the exact same weight as the original city and the air around it before. Nothing disappears.
Un siglo después, toda la naturaleza había sido clasificada en dos grandes reinos. La energía, las fuerzas que animaban los objetos, y la masa, la sustancia física que conformaba dichos objetos. La ciencia del siglo XIX se basaba en estos dos poderosos pilares. Las leyes que gobernaban a una no aplicaban a la otra. Pero al joven recién ingresado a la carrera de física, Albert Einstein, no le gustaban las leyes.
But Cliff, Einstein, what happened to you?
It is more than a little ironic, having been reprimanded yesterday by that idiot Professor Pernay for poor attendance, that I should in fact attend a practical lesson, which was as long as it was boring and utterly pointless, by the way, only to be the victim of an explosion of my own apparatus.
So it was your own fault then?
Thank you. And how are you today?
Fraulein manage?
Extremely well, Herr Einstein. All the better for seeing you have escaped the physics laboratory with your life.
Well, in order not to alarm you any further, I pledge to forever continue my studies here at the Café Bahnhof,
reading only the great masters of theoretical physics and eschewing the babbling nonsense of the polytechnicians.
It's about all you ever do.
It's getting a little stuffy in here, Fraulein Marich. Would you care to take a walk with me? There's something I'd like to discuss with you.
Why, Herr Einstein? Of course. Perhaps you'd like me to tell you what you have missed in lectures this week.
Einstein wasn't exactly a model student. He excelled in certain subjects, especially physics and math, but he wasn't very diligent in a lot of his other classes. He was undoubtedly very questioning, which seems to have annoyed most of his professors throughout his life. He would pursue his fascinations with just incredible determination.
We know from his letters that Einstein, even from the age of 16, was literally obsessed with the nature of light. Everyone he could speak to, his friends, his colleagues, even his then girlfriend, Mileva Merrick, who would become his wife, everyone he badgered with the question, what is light?
What would I see if I rode on a beam of light?
What? A beam of light? By what method do you propose to ride on this beam of light?
The method is not important. Let us just imagine me two are young, radical, bohemian experimenters, hand in hand on a journey to the outer reaches of the universe, and we are riding on the front of a wave of light.
I really don't know what you are suggesting, Herr Einstein. Do you wish to hold my hand or ridicule me?
Ridicule you? No, never. I merely want you to help me to understand. What would we see, do you think, if we were together and we sped up and up until we caught up to the front of a beam of light?
La incansable búsqueda de la luz de Einstein lo llevaría a revolucionar la ciencia. Con la luz reinventaría el universo y descubriría la vía oculta que une la energía y la masa. La luz se mueve con increíble rapidez, a casi 1.100 millones de kilómetros por hora. Por eso los científicos usan el término C, celeritas en latín, que significa velocidad.
¿Con quién contrajo matrimonio Einstein en 1903? Milena Maric, Helen Dukas, Elsa Einstein. Continuamos.
Por este muelle ha pasado buena parte de nuestro negocio.
Estudios de Zúrich, con quien tuvo 2 hijos, Hans Albert y Edward. Regresamos.
Mucho antes del siglo XIX, los científicos habían calculado la velocidad de la luz, pero nadie sabía qué era exactamente. En Inglaterra, un hombre que ya conocemos estaba por hacer una estimación fundamentada. Tras la muerte de Sir Humphrey Davy, Michael Faraday se convirtió en el profesor Faraday, uno de los investigadores más importantes del mundo. A la comunidad científica aún le costaba aceptar que la electricidad y el magnetismo eran 2 aspectos del mismo fenómeno que Faraday llamaba electromagnetismo. Pero esta vez tenía una proposición aún más extravagante para su público.
Invisible lines that can emanate from electricity in a wire, from a magnet, or even from the sun. For it is my contention that light itself is just one form of these vibrating lines of electromagnetism.
Por 15 años luchó Faraday para convencer a los escépticos de que la luz era una onda electromagnética, pero le faltaban los cálculos avanzados que sustentaran su idea. A la larga, alguien fue a su rescate. El profesor James Clerk Maxwell creía en las adelantadas ideas de Faraday y tenía la habilidad matemática para demostrarlo. Maxwell y el ya anciano Faraday se volvieron buenos amigos.
James, forgive me. A word of advice. Don't get old.
Michael, how are you?
I'm fine. Memory isn't too good.
Well, I thought you might like to see what I've just published.
Oh, yes. Splendid.
So your results show that when electricity flows along a wire, what it actually does is create a little bit of magnetism. And as that magnetic charge moves, it creates a little piece of electricity. Electricity and magnetism are interwoven, like a never-ending braid. So it is always pulsing forward. It's wonderful. Wonderful. Michael, there's something very crucial in maths. This electricity producing magnetism and magnetism producing electricity can only ever happen at a very particular speed. The equations are very clear about it. They come up with just one number. 670 million miles per hour.
I'm not sure.
It's the speed of light. That is the speed of light. You were right all along. Light is an electromagnetic wave.
Maxwell había demostrado que Faraday tenía razón. La electricidad y el magnetismo son dos aspectos solamente de una unidad más profunda. Una fuerza ahora llamada electromagnetismo que viaja a 1070 millones de kilómetros por hora. En su forma visible no es otra cosa más que la luz misma. Y nada le fascinaba más al joven Einstein que la luz.
We have lectures in half an hour.
Oh, let me think. Professor Weber and his life-draining monologue? Or you, Mozart, and James Clerk Maxwell?
We can't. We'll get a warning.
Our project is too precious to waste time listening to those dullards. Come with me. We'll read Maxwell and think about the electromagnetic theory of light.
Oh, why, my dear little Johnny, how you enchant a lady. She's very pretty.
Yes. But can she soar and dance like our dark souls do?
Maxwell's equations contained an incredible prediction. They said you could never catch up to a beam of light. Even if you were traveling at 670 million miles an hour, you would still see light squiggle away from you at 670 million miles an hour.
Do you see how she stares at that wave?
Yes.
You see how for her it is static?
Yes.
She and the wave are traveling at the same speed. We see the wave moving through the water, but relative to her, it just sits there. So is light like that?
Common sense would say that if you caught up to a light beam, there would be a wave of light just sitting there. Maybe it would be shimmering, a bit of electricity and a bit of magnetism.
So, if she was traveling alongside the light wave, it wouldn't be moving. It would be static. But Maxwell says you can't have static light.
Maybe Maxwell is wrong. Maybe if you catch up to light, it is static, Albert, like a wave next to a bird.
Imagine if I was sitting still and holding a mirror to my face. And the light travels from my face to the mirror, and I see my face.
Yes.
However, if I and the mirror were traveling at the speed of light...
You're going at the same speed as the light leaving your face.
Exactly.
The light never reaches the mirror.
So would I be invisible?
That doesn't make sense.
El joven Einstein comenzaba a darse cuenta de que la luz era diferente a cualquier otro tipo de onda. Einstein estaba por entrar a un universo surreal en el que la energía, la masa y la velocidad de la luz se entretejen en una forma que nadie había sospechado nunca. Pero había un último ingrediente matemático que Einstein necesitaba: el proceso cotidiano de elevar al cuadrado. Mucho antes de la Revolución Francesa, los científicos no sabían bien cómo cuantificar el movimiento. Las ecuaciones que explicaban cómo los objetos se movían y colisionaban estaban en pañales. Una contribución crucial a este respecto provino de una fuente inusual. Les presento a la aristocrática hija de 16 años de uno de los cortesanos del rey Luis XIV, Émilie du Châtelet.
Quickly! Father's coming.
Émilie du Châtelet influiría muchísimo en la física durante su trágica y corta vida. Inaudito en una mujer de su época, publicó varias obras científicas, incluida una traducción de Principia de Sir Isaac Newton, el tratado más importante sobre movimiento que se haya escrito. La traducción de Châtelet es aún el texto usado actualmente en Francia.
Musa mihi causas memora.
Muse my memory code.
Oh, Muse, the causes and the crimes relate. What goddess was provoked and whence her hate? For what offense the Queen of Heaven began to persecute so brave, so just a man?
Do not be cross with your sister, because she persecutes many a just man. Only the other night, Emily silenced the Duc de Luynes when she divided a ridiculously long number in her head in a matter of seconds. You should have seen the incredulity on their faces when they realized Emily was correct.
Was it my sister's astounding intelligence or her boundless beauty that made their mouths gape, I wonder?
Oh, well, yes. You have a point, monsieur.
Monsieur, I thank you for your kindness. I fear, however, that my wit is only a curiosity to others. If only my mind were permitted opportunity.
My dearest Emily, you are blessed with intellect and courage. Use them both, and the world will fall at your feet.
No.
In one sense, she is a woman utterly out of her true time and place. She's a philosopher, a scientist, a mathematician, a linguist. She demands a freedom that women didn't begin to enjoy until over 150 years later. A freedom to study science, to write about it, and to be published.
Du Châtelet se casó con un general del ejército francés a los 19 años y tuvo 3 hijos. Llevaba una vida familiar muy agitada a la vez que continuaba su pasión por la ciencia. Tenía 23 años cuando descubrió las matemáticas avanzadas. Con mucho entusiasmo, tomaba clases con uno de los más grandes matemáticos de la época, Pierre de Maupertuis. Él era experto en Newton y ella era su joven y ávida alumna. Al parecer tuvieron una breve aventura, pero entonces él se marchó a una expedición polar. Du Châtelet se enamoró entonces apasionadamente de Voltaire, el más grande poeta francés. Por sus fuertes críticas al rey y a la Iglesia Católica, Voltaire había estado 2 veces en la cárcel y se exilió a Inglaterra, donde las ideas de Newton lo cautivaron. De vuelta a Francia no tardó en volver a insultar al rey. Du Châtelet lo ocultó en su casa de campo.
The poor little creature is devoted to him.
Lejos de París, Du Châtelet y Voltaire convirtieron el castillo de ella en un palacio de aprendizaje y cultura que incluso tenía un pequeño teatro, y todo con la aparente bendición del marido.
There's a great deal of myth surrounding Du Châtelet and her love life, and most of it is very exaggerated. But her husband did accept Voltaire into his household, and he often went to Paris on behalf of Voltaire. He went to his publisher to plead Voltaire's case, to keep Voltaire out of jail. And it is also true that Emily du Châtelet did have several affairs of a fleeting nature.
Bravo, bravo!
She created an institution to rival that of France's Royal Academy of Sciences. Many of the great philosophers, poets, and scientists of the day visited.
Oh, monsieur, you are young. I hope that soon you will judge me for my own merits, or lack of them. But do not look upon me as an appendage to this great general, or that renowned scholar. I am in my own right a whole person, responsible to myself alone for all that I am, all that I say, all that I do.
Du Châtelet aprendió de los hombres brillantes que la rodeaban, pero pronto desarrolló sus propias ideas. Para el horror de sus mentores, incluso se atrevió a sospechar que había un error en el razonamiento del gran Sir Isaac Newton. Newton afirmaba que la energía de un objeto, la fuerza con la que choca con otro objeto, podía calcularse simplemente multiplicando su masa por su velocidad. Basándose en científicos alemanes, Du Châtelet aprendió otro punto de vista, el de Gottfried Leibniz. Él proponía que los objetos en movimiento tenían una suerte de espíritu interior. A esto le llamó vis viva, que en latín significa fuerza viva. Muchos desecharon sus ideas, pero Leibniz estaba convencido de que la energía de un objeto se obtenía multiplicando su masa por su velocidad al cuadrado.
Taking the square of something is an ancient procedure. If you say a garden is 4 square, you mean that it might be built up by 4 slabs along one edge and 4 along the other. So the total number of paving slabs is 4 times 4, 16. If the garden is 8 square, 8 by 8, well, 8 squared is 64. It'll have 64 slabs in it. This huge multiplication, this building up by squares, is something you find in nature all the time.
Emily, you are being absurd. Why ascribe to an object a vague and immeasurable force like vis viva? It is a return to the old ways. It is the occult!
When movement commences, you said it is true that a force is produced which did not exist until now. Think of our bodies. To have free will, we must be free to initiate motion. So all Leibniz is asking is, where does all this force come from?
In your case, my dear, the force, I am sure, is primeval.
Oh, you're infuriating. You hide behind wit and sarcasm. You only think you understand Newton. You're incapable of understanding Leibniz. You're a provocateur. Everything you do is about something else and makes trouble for you. Criticize this, denounce that. Are you capable of discovering something of your own?
I discovered you!
Pese a su abrumador apoyo a Newton, Du Châtelet no abandonó sus ideas. Un día se enteró de un experimento realizado por un científico holandés, Willems Gravesand, que le daría la razón.
Gravesand in Leiden has been dropping lead balls into a pan of clay.
Dropping lead balls into clay? How very imaginative.
Using Newton's formulas, Monsieur Voltaire, he then drops a second ball from a higher height, calculated to exactly double the speed of the first ball on impact. So, monsieur, care for a little wager? Newton tells us that by doubling the speed of the ball, we will double the distance it travels into the clay. Leibniz asks us to square that speed. If he is correct, the ball will travel not 2, but 4 times as far. So, who is correct?
Monsieur, I feel Mr. Newton's reputation dwindling ever so slightly.
Oh, Maupertuis, do not succumb to her. There is no earthly reason to ascribe hidden forces to this Dutchman's lead balls.
Well, the ball travels 4 times further.
Turns out, Leibniz is the one who was right. It's the best way to express the energy of a moving object. If you drive a car at 20 miles an hour, it takes a certain distance to stop if you slam on the brakes. If you're going 3 times as fast, you're going 60 miles an hour, it won't take you 3 times as long to stop. It'll take you 9 times as long to stop.
Oh, well, it does seem worth consideration.
Perhaps we might look over his calculations.
I have already checked his figures. I am sure Leibniz is correct on this point. I intend to include a section on this matter in my book.
Really? Do be careful, madame. Do you think the Academy is ready for such an opinion?
Quite. We really should be careful.
We? I see no reason to delay. There is no right time for the truth.
Émilie du Châtelet published her Institutions of Physics in 1740, and it provoked great controversy. Voltaire wrote that she was a great man whose only fault was being a woman. In her day, that was a great compliment.
I am with child.
You are sure?
Undoubtedly. 2 to 3 months. I'm afraid that
You are afraid? You should... Well, this child is obviously not mine. Nor is it your husband's. Oh, Émilie.
Émilie du Châtelet knew that in the 18th century, for a woman to become pregnant at the age of 43 was really very dangerous. And all the while she was pregnant, she had terrible premonitions about what was going to happen.
Toda su vida, du Châtelet había tratado de superar las limitaciones impuestas a su género. Al final, una aventura con un joven soldado causó su muerte. 6 días después de dar a luz a su 4º hijo, sufrió una embolia y murió. La convicción de Émilie du Châtelet respecto a que la energía de un objeto es una función del cuadrado de su velocidad levantó un fiero debate. Tras su muerte, pasaron 100 años para que la idea fuera aceptada. Justo a tiempo para que Einstein usara esta brillante intuición para finalmente reunir energía y masa con la luz. Einstein persiguió la luz durante su estancia en la universidad e incluso después. Por desgracia, había disgustado a tantos profesores que ninguno quiso recomendarlo. Aceptó un empleo de poca paga en la oficina de patentes de Suiza. Él y Mileva se casaron y tuvieron un hijo. La joven familia luchaba, pero nada parecía molestar a Albert.
Einstein, I see you are busy, as usual. Look, Einstein. You have shown some quite good achievements, but listen, about your promotion. I really think it would be better to wait until you have become more fully familiar with mechanical engineering. I'm sorry. Perhaps next time.
But I wanted to hire a maid so I can get back and finish my degree. Now I will never pass my dissertation.
Oh, come, my pretty little duck. All will be fine. You'll see.
How will it be fine, Albert? Do I have to just wait another year until you are promoted? Come on. Oh,
all will be fine. All will be fine. You'll see.
There really is a very charming but kind of a self-centered streak to Einstein. He focuses only on his particular obsessions. If the rest of the world fits in around him, that's fine. If they can't, it doesn't bother him.
¿Qué instrumento musical tocaba Einstein desde los 6 años? El violín, la guitarra, el oboe. Continuamos. Einstein tocaba desde los 6 años el violín, su instrumento musical favorito de por vida, al que llamaba Lina. Regresamos.
And he's going to come and tell us.
Albert. Your pretty neck and your head spins.
Okay, so we must behold and comprehend the mysterious.
Well, that kind of mysterious is going to get you into trouble.
I'll tell you what is truly mysterious. The secret of a long and happy marriage.
The mathematics are fine, if a little unconventional, but this only works for big systems. It'll fall down when you apply it to small systems.
I disagree.
Oh, no. Here we go. Another grand theory by Herr Albert Einstein, a patent clerk, third class.
What would happen if one applied those formulae to electromagnetic radiation?
Albert, you can't just take one bit of physics and apply it without proper regard to a completely different area.
Why not?
Albert, I know you like the grand linkages, the big theories, but wouldn't things be better all round if you just got going in some small area? Got a university post, get a decent wage, for God's sake. At least Mileva could study again. Then she'd be happy, and you'd be happy.
Ah, the vulgar struggle for survival. Food and sex. Spoken like a true bourgeois. Bessel, I want to know how God created this world. I'm not interested in this or that phenomenon, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. The rest? The details.
Yes, but you can't feed your children on his thoughts, Bertie.
So it turns out Einstein was going for a walk with his very close friend, Michel Besso. They'd studied physics together and talked about physics and philosophy for years and years. They were very close. They had cornered the question of light from every possible angle.
See, this clock over here.
Mientras Einstein y Bessel cavilaban sobre cuánto tardaría la luz en llegar a ellos desde relojes a distancias distintas, Einstein tuvo una inspiración monumental.
Thank you. Thank you. I have completely solved the problem.
Albert! What Einstein did was completely turn the problem on its head. Other scientists had found it impossible to accept Maxwell's idea that light would always move away from you at 670 million miles an hour, even if you too were traveling really fast. But Einstein just accepted that as a fact. Light's speed never, ever changes. Then, what he did was bend everything we know about the universe to fit light's fixed speed. What he discovered was that to do that, you have to slow down time.
His extraordinary insight is that time, as you approach the speed of light, time itself will slow down. It's a monumental shift in how we see the world.
The very instant when Einstein had this brilliant insight that time could slow down, well, the floodgates began to open. You see, before then, people had assumed that time was like a wristwatch on God's hand, that it beat at a steady rate throughout the universe, no matter where you were. Einstein said no, that the tick-tick-tick of this wristwatch was actually the click-click-click of electricity, turning into magnetism, turning into electricity. In other words, the steady pace of light itself.
"1905 was a miraculous year for Einstein and for physics. He had an unbelievable outpouring of creativity. It starts with his publication of a paper on how to work out the true size of atoms. 2 months later is the publication of his paper on the nature of light. That's what we'll learn of the Nobel Prize. The third paper, only a month later, is on how molecules move when heated, and that finally ends the debate on whether atoms really exist. The fourth paper is published at the end of this half-year period. In it, Einstein sets out his theory of light, time, and space. It was this theory of special relativity. That changed the way we see the world.
En el nuevo mundo de Einstein, la única constante verdadera no era el tiempo ni el espacio, sino la luz. Pero el año milagroso de Einstein aún no acababa. En un último y grandioso artículo de 1905, propuso una unidad aún más profunda. Al calcular las implicaciones de su nueva teoría, notó otra conexión extraña, esta vez entre la energía, la masa y la luz.
Einstein realizes that the speed of light is kind of like a cosmic speed limit. Nothing can go faster. So imagine we have a train charging along, and let's say it's getting up to the speed of light, and we're stuffing more and more energy in, trying to get it to go faster and faster. But it's still bumping up against the speed of light. So all this energy, where does it go? It has to go somewhere. Amazingly, it goes into the object's mass. From our point of view, the train actually gets heavier. The energy becomes mass. It's an incredible idea. Even Einstein is amazed by it.
I think I have found a connection between energy and mass, if I am right.
then energy and mass are not absolute. They are not distinct. They can be converted into one another. Energy can become mass, and mass can become energy. And not just energy equaling mass. Energy equals mass times the square of the speed of light.
Would you like me to check your mathematics?
Einstein envió su quinto y grandioso artículo en 1905 para que lo publicaran. En 3 páginas exponía simplemente que la energía y la masa estaban conectadas por el cuadrado de la velocidad de la luz, E igual a m por c al cuadrado. Con 4 notas conocidas en la escala de la naturaleza, este oficial de patentes había compuesto una melodía totalmente nueva. La culminación de su solitario viaje de 10 años hacia la luz.
Here we are for thousands of years thinking that over here is a world of objects, of matter, and over there is an entirely separate world of movement, of forces, of energy. And Einstein says, no, they're not separate. Energy can become mass, and crucially, mass can also become energy. There's a deep unity between energy, matter, and light.
E equals mc squared. That equation shows that every piece of matter in our universe has stored within it a fantastic amount of energy. The speed of light, for example, is about 300 million meters per second. You multiply that by itself, and you get 90 quadrillion. So in other words, what is matter? In some sense, matter is nothing but the condensation of vast amounts of energy. So in other words, if you could somehow unlock all the energy stored within my pen, that would erupt with a force comparable to an atomic bomb.
After Einstein's 5th great 1905 paper, physicists no longer spoke of mass or energy. They're now the same thing to us.
Quizá el año más milagroso en la ciencia humana terminó en silencio. Los artículos se publicaron para repercutir en nada. Luego, lentamente, comenzó. Una carta por aquí, una carta por allá. Durante 4 años, Einstein respondió diligentemente a cada cuestionamiento, tratando de explicar su dificultad, sus ideas complejas, a una confundida comunidad de físicos.
I love the idea that life just went on as normal. Here are these universe-changing papers circling around, and the world is struggling to come to terms with them.
Einstein had a fan club of just one. Luckily, it happened to be the most important living physicist.
Einstein. Max Planck has sent someone to see you.
Max Planck?
Yes, he has sent his assistant. He's here to see you.
Max Planck alentaba a los físicos más eminentes del mundo a tomar en serio a Einstein. Tras 4 años de espera, lo nombraron profesor de física de la Universidad de Zúrich. A partir de ahí, su carrera se volvió meteórica. Fue profesor de física en Berlín, logró el reconocimiento mundial y su nombre se hizo conocido. Es el padre indiscutible de la física moderna. Pero el éxito de Einstein fue el fin de su matrimonio. En 1919 se divorció de Mileva y se casó con su prima. Su fama le ganó múltiples romances. E igual a m por c al cuadrado se convirtió en el santo grial de la ciencia. Albergaba la promesa de vastas reservas de energía encerradas dentro del átomo. Einstein sospechaba que tomaría cientos de años de investigación para liberarla. Pero no contaba con la Segunda Guerra Mundial y el genio de una mujer judía en la Alemania de Hitler. La austriaca Lise Meitner, de 28 años, era terriblemente tímida. Pese a su ansiedad, la joven doctora en física, la austriaca Lise Meitner, de 28 años, era terriblemente tímida. Pese a su ansiedad, la joven doctora en física llegó a Berlín decidida a iniciar una carrera en el emocionante y nuevo campo de la radiactividad. Por suerte, un hombre acudió en su ayuda.
Fräulein Meitner.
Yes?
Otto Hahn. I'm a researcher in the Chemistry Institute. Professor Planck suggested I...
Herr Hahn, I have read your papers on thorium and on mesothorium, and Dr. Planck suggested that
Yes, he suggested that I speak with you. I need someone to collaborate with.
I think I could really help with the physical analysis.
And the mathematics.
Yes, yes. And the mathematics.
Studying radioactive atoms has become so much a collaboration between chemistry and physics these days.
Yes, yes.
I'll ask Fischer for a laboratory then.
Excellent.
I'll speak to you soon.
Lise Meitner acababa de dar el primer paso de un viaje que cambiaría de forma irrevocable la historia del mundo. Para ella sería un camino lleno de éxitos y reconocimientos, pero también de terror y traiciones.
At this time, not a lot was known about the atom. At first, people thought it was like a miniature solar system. There was a solid nucleus at the center, and electrons would spin around it, sort of like planets around our sun. A little later, some researchers proposed that the nucleus itself wasn't a solid chunk, but was made up of separate particles of protons and neutrons. But then, in what are called radioactive metals, things like radium and uranium, the nucleus itself seemed to be unstable, leaking out energy in particles. Perhaps this was an example of E equals mc squared, the mass of a nucleus turning into energy.
La colaboración entre Meitner y Hahn para descubrir los secretos del átomo comenzó con un paso muy desigual. A él le dieron un laboratorio, a ella la obligaron a trabajar en la carpintería.
I see you haven't set your hair on fire.
Herr Hahn?
The boss, he thinks that if he lets women into the Chemistry Institute, they'll set their hair on fire.
Oh, so his beard must be fireproof.
Good day, Herr Hahn. Good day.
You see, I am non-existent to this place. At least physicists recognize me for my abilities.
Yes, where would we chemists be without the steadying hand of the physicist?
It took years, but Lisa lost her shyness eventually. In 1912, she and Hahn moved to the brand new Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Chemistry, where their status was really that of equals. Lisa became the first woman in Germany ever to have the title of professor.
Lisa, I have news. Remember the art student I told you of?
Yes, Edith.
Yes, I have asked her to marry me, and she has accepted.
Oh, Dr. Hahn, congratulations.
Yes, well, I wanted you to be the first to know.
Oh, I'm very pleased for you. Very pleased.
Lisa Meitner was warm-hearted by nature. She had many friends, and she may have wanted to have a closer relationship with Otto, but it really does seem that physics was Lisa's first love, maybe even her passion.
La década de los 20 y los 30 fueron la época dorada de la investigación nuclear. El núcleo más grande que se conocía en la época era el del átomo de uranio, que contenía 238 protones y neutrones. Meitner y Hahn encabezaban la carrera para ver si podían crearse núcleos aún más grandes, agregando más neutrones.
So, the atom, pretty familiar. Nucleus in the center, electrons orbiting around. The nucleus is our focus. The nucleus made up of protons and neutrons. Now, the largest nucleus that we know is that of the uranium atom. Its nucleus is a tightly packed structure of 238 protons and neutrons. The thrust of our work is to try to fire neutrons into this huge structure, and if we can get a neutron to stick in here, it will be a breakthrough.
Meitner podía estar a punto de hacer un gran descubrimiento, pero la Alemania de los años 30 era un lugar peligroso, incluso para una científica de primera clase.
The U.S. endangers our institute.
When the Nazis came to power, one of the first things they did was to drive out Jewish academics from the universities. Einstein was very prominent, and for that reason, he was one of the first to go. He was hounded out of Germany in 1933. Lisa was not dismissed at that time. She was able to stay because she was Austrian. But in March 1938, Austria was annexed into Germany, and at that point, her situation became untenable.
What is it?
Frightening news.
What's happened?
Kurt Hess is going around saying that I should be got rid of.
I actually knew. I heard today I was going to speak to the treasurer of the institute before I told you. We'll speak to him tomorrow. Come on, let's get you home. It's late. We'll finish up.
La presión sobre Meitner era insoportable. Hahn, conocido por sus opiniones antinazismo, la protegió como pudo, al menos al principio.
I need to talk to you about Lisa.
Not now, I'm too busy. We have to protect her. How? What can we do? The situation is the way it is. Who knows what will happen next? She can't stay. It's just not tenable.
But she hasn't got a visa or even a valid passport. And she may soon be forbidden to leave Germany.
We can't harbor a Jew. If she stays, the regime will shut us all down.
Lisa. Orline demands that you leave.
You can't throw her out.
Orline says you should not come into the Institute anymore.
Well, I have to write up then. It's all in radiation tomorrow, so I have to come in.
You've given up.
Cuando se hizo claro que Maitna sería despedida y tal vez arrestada, físicos de toda Europa la invitaron a dar conferencias, dándole la excusa para salir de Alemania. Los alemanes se negaron a dejarla ir. En julio de 1938, un colega holandés fue a Berlín e ilegalmente llevó por tren a Lise a Holanda. El viaje fue aterrador, hasta el punto que ella le suplicó regresar. Pese al gran peligro, siguió.
¿En qué año Einstein publicó la teoría general de la relatividad? 1910, 1916, 1921. Continuamos. En 1916, Einstein publicó la teoría general de la relatividad. Regresamos.
She had lost everything. Her home, her position, her books, her salary, her pension, even her native language. She had been cut off from her work just at the time when she was leading the field and was on the brink of a major scientific discovery.
Y pese a las privaciones que sufrió, Lise seguía pensando en la física. Increíblemente, ella y Hahn pudieron colaborar por carta.
I hope, my dear Otto, that after 30 years of work together and friendship in the Institute, that at least the possibility remains that you tell me as much as you can about what is happening back there.
Lisa was invited by an old student friend to spend Christmas on the west coast of Sweden. Her nephew, Otto Robert Frisch, who was also a physicist, came to join her there.
Aunt? 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 Lisa, how are you, my dear? Merry Christmas, Aunt.
I need your help. Come on, let's go out.
But I was hoping you'd help me.
En Berlín, Hahn estaba obteniendo resultados extraños. No encontró pruebas que indicaran que bombardear el núcleo del uranio con neutrones aumentara su tamaño. De hecho, sus experimentos parecían haberse contaminado de radio, un átomo más pequeño. Necesitaba con desesperación el análisis experto de Meitner. Lise comenzaba a sospechar que algo muy diferente ocurría con su experimento.
Hahn and Strassman are getting some strange results with the uranium work.
Really?
A couple of months ago, Hahn told me that they were finding radium amongst the uranium products. We are looking for a much bigger element, and here we're finding something much smaller. I urged Hahn to check again. It couldn't be radium. And now he writes to me and tells me that it's not radium, it's barium.
That's even smaller.
Exactly. Hahn is sure that it's another error, but I don't know anymore. It is at least possible that barium is being produced.
So Hahn still needs you to interpret the data.
It is my work too, you know.
Exactly.
Well, I can't be there, can I? Come on, let's walk.
Surely he's made a mistake, hasn't he? He hasn't done what you told him to.
Oh, my darling Robert, he may not be a brilliant theorist, but he's too good a chemist to get this wrong.
If you imagine a drop of water, a big drop, it's unstable, on the verge of breaking apart. It turns out that a big nucleus like uranium is just like that. Now, for 4 years, Meitner and Hahn and all other physicists had thought that if you pump more neutrons into this nucleus, it'll just get bigger and heavier. But suddenly, Meitner and Frisch, out in the midday snow, realized that this nucleus might just get so big that it would split in two.
If the nucleus is so big that it has trouble staying together, then couldn't just a little tiny jog from a neutron...
Yes, but if the nucleus did split, the two halves would fly apart with a huge amount of energy. Where's that energy going to come from?
How much energy?
Well, we worked out that the mutual repulsion between two nuclei would generate about 200 million electron volts. But something has to supply that energy.
Wait, let me do a packing friction calculation. The two nuclei are lighter than the original nucleus of the uranium by about 1/5 of a proton in mass.
What? So some mass has been lost. Einstein's E equals mc squared.
If we multiply the lost mass by the speed of light squared, we get 200 million electron volts. He split the atom.
No. You've split the atom.
It was an amazing discovery. Of course, in the laboratory, we're talking about tiny amounts of uranium and correspondingly tiny amounts of energy. But the point is that the amount of energy released was relatively large, and that it came from the mass of the uranium itself. The energy released was entirely consistent with Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared.
Meitner y Frisch publicaron el descubrimiento de lo que llamaron fisión nuclear y obtuvieron reconocimiento, pero una traición los esperaba. Otto Hahn estaba presionado por el régimen nazi para que sacara a su colega nazi de la jugada. Solo a él le otorgaron el Premio Nobel de 1944 por el descubrimiento. En su discurso apenas si mencionó el relevante papel que había tenido Meitner. Tristemente, después de la guerra siguió diciendo que había sido él y no Meitner quien había descubierto la fisión nuclear.
Now I want to write something personal, which disturbs me and which I ask you to read with more than 40-year friendship in mind.
and with the desire to understand me. I am now referred to as Han's longtime co-worker. How would you feel if you were only characterized as the longtime co-worker of me? After the last 15 years, which I wouldn't wish on any good friend, shall my scientific past also be taken from me? Is that fair? And why is it happening?
Lisa Meitner had been working on this for 30 years. She'd only broken apart a handful of atoms, but that was enough. Once she had broken even one, the genie was out of the bottle. What Meitner had started, after that, physicists around the world began to realize they could take it a lot further.
En 1942 había iniciado un esfuerzo intenso por fabricar una bomba atómica. En todo Estados Unidos se extendieron instalaciones secretas con el nombre clave de Proyecto Manhattan.
Meitner was asked to join the Manhattan Project, and she refused. She refused to have anything to do with the atomic bomb. But Robert Frisch was different. He was an important member of the team because he was convinced of the need to beat the Nazis in a nuclear arms race.
La bomba nuclear nunca se habría de usar en Alemania, pero estalló en Hiroshima y Nagasaki y demostró el terrible poder destructivo de E igual a m por c al cuadrado. Vastas cantidades de energía en la forma de radiación electromagnética se liberaron en unos cuantos kilos de uranio y plutonio. Mientras la simple curiosidad de los científicos más dotados del mundo le habían dado irónicamente a la humanidad un arma de destrucción masiva, la vida de la ecuación tiene una historia paralela de creación y belleza. Actualmente, jóvenes físicos continúan la búsqueda de Einstein. Desde su nacimiento, E igual a m por c al cuadrado se ha usado para internarse en las profundidades del tiempo, para responder a la pregunta más grande de todas: ¿de dónde venimos? En los aceleradores de partículas, los investigadores impulsan partículas atómicas a la velocidad de la luz y hacen que colisionen, creando condiciones como las que había en el Big Bang.
E equals mc squared actually tells us how the Big Bang itself happened. In the first moments of creation, the universe was this immensely dense, immensely concentrated eruption of energy. As it rushed apart and expanded, huge amounts of energy, or E, were converted into mass, or M. Pure energy became matter. It became the particles and atoms, and it eventually formed the first stars.
Our sun is a huge furnace floating in space, and it's powered by E equals mc squared. Now, it turns out every second, 4 million tons of solid mass of the sun disappears, comes out as energy, not just a little bit of energy. It's enough to light up our entire solar system, make the solar system glow with heat and light.
And not only do stars emit energy in accordance with E equals mc squared, the whole process actually creates life itself. Eventually, a massive star dies, the debris floats around, clusters together, gets pulled into the orbits of another star, and becomes a planet. We humans and the Earth we stand on are made of stardust. We are a direct product of E equals mc squared.
Al basarse en el trabajo de científicos de todas las épocas, nuevas generaciones están buscando respuestas. Usando nuevas y audaces herramientas que alcanzan casi la velocidad de la luz, ahora pueden hacerse preguntas que sus predecesores jamás habrían imaginado. Como Einstein mismo sabía, el viaje hacia el descubrimiento a veces es doloroso y otras feliz. Es tan antiguo como la curiosidad humana y nunca, nunca termina. Narrado en español por José Luis Palomera de la Red, con la colaboración de Liliana Torres y América Nieves.
Entre 4 Delgado, qué bien ahí,
Excelente. Titular de esa lateral derecha, este chamaco.
Sí, señor.
Luis Delgado.
Movimiento largo, la prolongación de más. Y simplemente ya viviendo los últimos minutos de esto que prácticamente se escribe en los primeros 6 minutos con el 2-0 y luego ese penal fallado por parte de Cortés.
Regaló mucho Celaya.
Sí, sí, sí. Viene Peña con Montes. Peña abre bien, allá va Montes. Con todo ahí la presión defensiva. Bien Luisito, que bien encontrando el espacio. Se viene el León Vázquez encontrando la jugada por esta zona. Viene el servicio por parte de Eder Cruz.
Otra noche feliz para el local. De todo hay que aprender, ¿eh?
Sí.
No hay que confiarse. La expulsión de Nieves es la piedrita en el arroz. Lo del penal, se mueve un poquito antes Hernández. El pisotón de González, en otras circunstancias te lo pueden marcar y por ahí te botan, en fin.
Sí.
A todos los partidos los entrenadores tienen que buscarle el punto fino, ellos y sus asistentes.
Buena combinación, aquí está Montes, el centro, ¡gol! ¡Gol! ¡Gol de León! 5-0. Todo es alegría y felicidad. Aquí está la repetición, Nacho González estira la pierna. Pero me parece que es autogol, Eugenio.
¿Cuántas facilidades?
A ver.
Sí, es autogol. González me parece que ni la toca.
Sí.
Y si pasa la jugada, era fuera de juego para mí de más, si es que hubiera intervenido. muchas circunstancias en una sola jugada. Una goliza de escándalo, yo te lo decía, no es lo mismo perder por 3 que por 5 en el ánimo de la semana. Hay que trabajar y corregir rápido. Para mí es autogol, estoy contigo. Y va a Necaxa.
Allá en Aguascalientes.
No, a Celaya, va a Necaxa, pero
okay.
Caray. Caray. 3 partidos perdidos seguidos. Se tienen que reconsiderar varias cosas. El caso del chamaco Fuentes, que es el entrenador del Celaya, y que no llega pues, a los 40 años de edad. No sé qué edad tenga Fuentes. Muy jovencito.
Autogol entonces de Israel Solórzano, el número 13. Se viene más. Quiere más el señor Más. Abriendo servicio. Bien, Roldán. Se van a agregar 3 minutos.
Los 3 minutos de angustia para el Celaya. Cómo le gana en la espalda el jugador del Celaya. Qué bien entra Montes. No, es un autogol.
Claro.
Muy claro.
Y sabes que Más no estaba adelantado porque estaba a la misma altura de del balón, ¿eh?
Perfecto.
A mi juicio. Oye, le metiste 5 goles al Veracruz y ahora 5 goles al Celaya, ¿eh? Entiendo que el día de hoy Celaya regaló demasiado, pero ¿estás de acuerdo que en estas épocas siempre hacer 5 goles?
Sí, es importante.
Es importante, ¿no?
Por supuesto. Así como pesa en el ánimo de la semana para el Celaya, seguramente ese vestidor va a estar muy bien, el de León. Se fortalecen. Siempre será más fácil corregir ganando que perdiendo. Aquí no se puede hacer confianza absoluta. Cada partido es diferente.
Ahora, ¿cuántas veces ha pasado en el fútbol mexicano que el superlíder va muy bonito
y se cae?
Y en la liguilla es otra historia, ¿no?
Es correcto. Aunque en los últimos años, si tú recordarás, el Necaxa ganó los 2 torneos.
Sí.
El actual campeón del primer torneo es la Universidad Autónoma de Tamaulipas. Y también había sido puntero. Vamos a ver en este segundo torneo quién es el gallo para luchar por el ascenso.
Al menos ya hay un premio más importante, ¿no? El pasar ya directamente a semifinales te da una fuerza todavía mayor. Y más como en fútbol, como lo está mostrando el equipo de Matosas cuando viene Trillo. Pero aún así, pues nada, es garantía. Recordar lo que le pasó a La Piedad contra Correcaminos en el torneo pasado.
Correcto. Sí, cada partido es diferente. Hay muchas circunstancias alrededor de un juego, más si es de liguilla. Muchas presiones, es otro el feeling. De todos, ¿eh? Jugadores, técnicos, árbitros, prensa, todo mundo se comporta diferente.
Viene el centro. Es una falta a favor de el León. Pues ya prácticamente cumpliéndose los 3 minutos de reposición.
Al propio León le pasaron la factura en la última liguilla. Cuando parecía que había argumentos para pensar en algo más, no sucedió. Así es que de todo se tiene que aprender. El equipo se ve más maduro y está goleando a muchos de sus rivales.
Bueno, pues de esta manera termina el encuentro. El 5-0 de León sobre el Celaya. Muy contundente la escuadra.